host, Alicia Morales, and this is a new episode of In Her Details. Today we have another great episode with a great guest. And in Her Details, we want to revitalize the family self, our values, our culture, and bring back tradition in our homes and in our church. And our guest today is Daniel, the founder of the religious organization Traditional Catholic Men, encouraging men to embrace authentic masculinity in the Catholic faith, the Latin Mass, and our spiritual weapon, the Rosary. It was very astonishing this past Saturday, and Daniel will tell us more about the Men's Rosary March. Welcome, Daniel, to In Her Details.
Thank you so much for having me on. So the Men's Rosary March is a penitential Catholic men's rosary march to which the 15-decade rosary is recited, in addition to the Divine Mercy Chaplet, the Litany of St. Joseph, and there's also various Marian hymns that are sung at the end of the march. The purpose of the Men's Rosary March is just to simply get Catholic men out there to profess the faith, because now more than ever, the church is experiencing not just a crisis within her home, but also a lack of masculinity. One could perhaps argue that it was due to the sexual revolution and all the subsequent changes that happened in the 1960s, and there is a lack thereof as a result. The Men's Rosary March is one very simple yet effective way in getting a man out to profess his faith, to not be afraid of being a Catholic, and also to do what needs to be done in showing the world that the Catholic Church is very much alive and very much vibrant and has a masculine presence in its men.
Absolutely. And it's, I commend you and everyone who attended this past Saturday. And it's been 5 years already, or how many years that the Rosary?
When the Men's Rosary Men's Rosary March first started, it essentially started off as a hike in San Diego when Traditional Catholic Men was founded in 2019. What started off as a simple hike between friends from a traditional Latin Mass parish eventually evolved into the Men's Rosary March, when now a good friend of mine and also a fellow Instagrammer, Sergio Flores of GMJ Cat 3, he once reached out, I'd say late 2020, and said, hey, we should do a Rosary March together. He's in Los Angeles, I'm in San Diego, and I'd say that divine providence had it that we selected Mission San Juan Capistrano in the city of San Juan Capistrano, California, as our location, because it's a halfway point between Los Angeles and San Diego. And also at the time, we wanted to find a way to pray in reparations for everything that was going on. As many have known, in 2020, it was a very unsettling and chaotic year due to the fact that there were plenty of rioting. And also a lot of churches, in particular, the missions over in California, were being attacked, whether it was being vandalized or burnt to the ground, unfortunately. And we wanted to find a way to pray in reparation for that. So Mission San Juan Capistrano really fit the bill, and we did our very first one on January 16th of 2021. It started off as, I'd say, about only 21. We were even thinking that perhaps it was just the two of us. I managed to convince some of my friends at my traditional Latin Mass parish to come along, and they were just like, screw it, might as well do something about it. And I think that Catholic social media was paying attention, and the next one that we had, the numbers just kept increasing and went from there.
Wow. Great. That's amazing. So do we see priests as well at the Rosary March? What age groups do we see?
So in terms of clergy, we do not have any as of right now. At the very beginning, we had contemplated it, being that myself, Sergio Flores of JMJ Cat 3, and Phil of One True Faith, we discussed it behind the scenes, and we felt that for the time being, it was best to just have laymen, because within traditional circles, if we were to get a priest out there, he becomes susceptible to being canceled, and we want to avoid that risk. However, there are certain priests behind the scenes that have reached out. Won't name names for the time being, but they have expressed interest in perhaps holding confessions for for those that are interested prior to the march or during the march or perhaps even after the march. We've had priests that have expressed interest. We have contemplated it and are still having ongoing discussions behind the scenes for that matter, whether we want to move forward with it. And in terms of the age group, we have just about everybody across the board. I've seen boys as young as 7, 6-year-olds that attend right alongside their fathers. The oldest man I've ever seen attend, I think he was in his 70s or 80s. So it's all across the board. We don't really have an age limit, so to speak, on who could attend. We welcome every able-bodied Catholic man to attend the Men's Rosary March.
And that's beautiful what you just said about, fathers taking their sons, because that's where it begins. That's where this, to revitalize the family style, the values, the faith in our homes. As we're seeing this cultural and generational crisis in the world today, in the confusion of the world, transition, and, we want to see this revitalized church, right? Our communities, our faith to remain strong, and masculinity to be this revival, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us first, what is a traditional Catholic man?
A traditional Catholic man is a man who embodies what he was born with, a biological man. Has to be said nowadays with all this chaotic cancellation culture, gender chaos. But in order to be a traditional Catholic man, one has to epitomize and embrace everything that is Catholic. You can't be a cafeteria Catholic and call yourself a Catholic man, because at that point you can't really call yourself Catholic if you don't embrace everything that is the Holy Mother Church, her disciplines, her teachings, that is written in Scripture and tradition. Also, on a practical side, he is a defender, guardian, and protector of not just his soul, but also the community that is around him. Also, if he has a family, his wife, his children, if he's a priest, his flock at his parish. That is what makes a traditional man traditionally Catholic. One doesn't have to look that far when it comes to the examples of the martyrs and the saints. You can look at St. Joseph as an example. You can look at the martyrs that have sacrificed their lives all throughout the ages for the Catholic Church. That is a great example of masculinity. And one could also even say for femininity too.
Yeah, exactly. Especially as we're seeing in the generation we are today, or the way a home or economy, where both the male and the female have to work. We see that in our homes today because how expensive, rent is, and but definitely that doesn't take away of maintaining a traditional Catholic family, or of it doesn't take us away from remaining firm in our faith.
Yes.
Yes. So, how can we revitalize our masculinity and femininity?
I think that if you look at the example of, again, the martyrs and the saints, it doesn't take that much other than to do your best to emulate them. Because one could easily look at the example of the Holy Family to see what the perfect image of a family is when it comes to living out their faith and also living out the family life. I would say that recognizing your role, I would say as a man, realizing that, again, you're the protector, provider, and presider of the family. That's one way to revitalize your masculinity. Also, frequenting the sacraments, that has to be coupled with your duties and responsibility as a man. And the same goes for women too, is frequenting the sacraments and looking to the example of the Blessed Virgin Mary to embody femininity. There's a lot of folks out there that unfortunately complicate things in the name of perhaps to create content for their social media or to make a buck or two off of it. However, it really boils down to, again, paying attention to the example of the Holy Family and all martyrs and saints throughout the ages, and perhaps seeking a patron within your family or perhaps your individual life to be that guidance that guides you as a man, guides you as a woman, and guides you towards heaven as a Catholic.
Exactly. Absolutely. And, leadership, definitely,
Yes.
taking leadership, and we're, us women, taking our leadership, but in a nurturing and a home way as well, and working as a, and this isn't only just as a family, but even in your singleness as well. You could already practice leadership in your masculinity and femininity as well.
Right.
Yes, definitely. And even revitalizing, yes, the family cell. I mean, at least I remember, and this I always like to talk about how tradition before we would see, even in our churches, even in our parishes, going on May 13th to offer flowers. There's a lot of cultural also traditions that we don't see maybe here in California, but we see them in our Latin American countries as well. But definitely those are cultures that we need to protect as well for the future generations, I believe. I don't know. What do you think, Danny?
I think that it should be preserved, but there also should be a recognition of the significance of it, because
Mm.
even in culturally Catholic countries, one could say that it's essentially just going through the motions, because well, in Southern California, you see images of Our Lady of Guadalupe all the time, but does everyone know the history of Our Lady of Guadalupe, or just simply, well, that's just a Mexican image? Because when you're just going through the motions, you don't realize the significance, and that's how one easily falls away from the Catholic faith. There's that saying, we Catholics become Protestants, and oftentimes strong Protestants become great Catholics. And I think that for the first part, it's because there are many that just simply go through the motions without looking into the significance of it. And once they discover the significance, they see the true beauty of why, say, perhaps like there are certain traditions of offering up flowers or having a devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, because after all, she brought so many converts into the Catholic Church after so many had fallen away during the Reformation era. But I think that when people only look at the surface and say, well, I only do this because my country does it, then they're really missing out on a lot that goes on behind the scenes. That's what I'd say Catholic wise too, is that it's appalling to see so many of those that have fallen away from the church that said, yeah, I did all of that. I prayed the rosary, did this whole Mary lover thing, and now I believe in the Bible. It's like, well, if you read scripture, you'll realize the significance of the Blessed Virgin Mary and all that make the Catholic Church the way that it is, instead of looking at it from a superficial point. So I think that when you look into the culture in depth and you see why things are done the way that they are, then that's what keeps you Catholic, and that's what gives you a cause that's worth fighting for.
Absolutely, yes, because we do see in our communities where it's they go to when it's Our Lady of Guadalupe, or the day to offer flowers on May 13th, or any other mandatory or day of obligation. I'm sorry, where it's like, because I have to go, or even Sunday Mass, where it's because it's an obligation, but it's not because it's actually their faith, or it's a firm faith. It's just because it's an obligation. So definitely there's a lot of work to do that we have to do. And I think definitely this, the Rosary March is a huge impact and example. And because we're led by example as well, leadership, right? For the coming generations, for our kids, and for us as well, because that's to continue nourishing ourselves. Yes.
Yeah, I think that that's the biggest problem right now all across the board when it comes to social media, is that I'd say that a majority of Catholic influencers are all about the aesthetics. It doesn't take that much to see whether it's constant pictures of a nice tweed suit and tie, or perhaps a beautiful Sunday dress coupled with a nice
Mhm.
hat or a veil and all these filtered aesthetical photos. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what plants the seed for so many to embrace tradition. And I once saw this hilarious tweet from a certain Protestant influencer who was saying she was absolutely concerned that a huge number of Gen Z was converting to Catholicism. And I was like, ha, who's winning? But I would say the problem, at least within Catholic circles right now, is a heavy emphasis on the aestheticism, but to actually embrace the certain aspects.
Mhm.
That is where a lot of Catholic influencers or those that view fall short. One could easily say, well, I love children, but try disciplining a child when they are acting out of line, or perhaps holding a child that is having a tantrum. Do your best to jump a car instead of just wearing a suit. Now, you ask anyone, say, for example, in 2020, there's a lot of guys that were all about the Deus Voltum life, saying Viva Cristo Rey, but when it came to defending the actual churches, they said, well, we'll leave it up to the professionals. My question to those individuals would be, well, who are the professionals? Because to paraphrase Venerable Fulton Sheen, you can't just rely on priests and bishops to do the job to see the church. It also involves the layman. And history has proven time and again all throughout the ages that the church has been in existence that oftentimes it was the laity that had to step up to the plate and take on the responsibility of protecting the church and defending those that are around them because priests and bishops can only do so much.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned about also about femininity, about the veil, because that also is a very well, it could be a topic where does it make me less of a sinner than the person who isn't wearing, the veil? Well, but it's not only the aesthetic of just wearing the veil, but the significance and also being in grace, because making sure that we're living our sacraments, making sure that we truly understand, not just for the aesthetics.
Yeah, when you focus on the aesthetics, that's where I find people to miss the point. I remembered how oftentimes when this is early on in the days when I first started off on Instagram, I noticed that there were certain prominent Catholic influencers of the female variety that would have gone to the traditional Latin mass and they were just thinking, well, everyone was mad dogging me because perhaps I wasn't wearing the right dress or the right veil.
Mhm.
And I couldn't help but think, well, if you're focusing on that sort of validation, please understand that not everyone pays attention for
Mhm.
starters because everyone is focused on preparing for the mass. Now, perhaps in a circumstantial situation, if the parish was like that, then there needs to be a serious mission or intervention on behalf of the pastor saying, listen, you shouldn't be doing that, especially when it's someone's first time. Now,
Mhm.
to go back to an individual influencer who says, well, I felt as if I was transported back in time and felt oppressed. Well, I would say to that individual, you missed the whole point if you are overthinking that because it really boils down to overthinking at the end of the day. In
Mhm.
addition to in addition to please, 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 please recognize the significance of perhaps veiling or dressing in a modest manner. It
Yes.
doesn't mean please become frumpy. Please do not do that. There are fashionable and beautiful ways to be modest in your attire, and
Mhm.
there's the significance and edification that comes with it too when
Mhm.
you pull everything right.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Because I do see, a lot of encouragement. Yes, definitely. But it's not only about just doing it, but the true significance of it as well.
Yeah.
So also, you know, the art of man's character, or in general, in man and woman, right? And the man's character, our minds have been battlefields. I mean, with everything going on, um, and we are fighting for control, right? What else can we add to that, Daniel?
I think that on the spiritual side, one must one must learn how to submit themselves to God's will. I think that we hear let go and let God all the time, but we really don't put it into practice. Recently, I completed the Surrender Novena, and I strongly recommend whoever has not heard about it before to do their due diligence in researching, and also perhaps doing their own Surrender Novena too, in which you submit yourselves to God and you also just let Him take care of everything. That's what I did prior to the Men's Rosary March, because as Murphy's Law dictates, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. And I found that in the years that I have been co-organizing the Rosary March, it's becoming increasingly difficult because of certain elements that arise in addition to the spiritual warfare that all three of us deal with behind the scenes of varying degrees. And one could easily say that my patience has been tested, and I suppose the devil just wants to see me lose my cool. However, I have to remind myself that God is all completely in control at the end of the day, and that I have to submit to His will, whatever it may be, for better or for worse. So that's on the spiritual side. On the practical side, I would say on the male side of Catholicism, being a man of your word really boils down to it. We see it in scripture, we see it in traditions that God promises and upholds it, as He has done for many of the prophets and soon to be the saints that we read about in scripture and also traditions. He is a God that keeps His word. So as a man, it's really prudent that you keep your word in whatever you do as a man, both on the spiritual and practical side of things. Just as how we are held accountable through doing penance after completion of confession, we have to be of our word.
Absolutely. I completely agree on that. And that goes to us women as well, being, of our word. If we say we are one person, well, or what we want to do, maintain that firmness in our word. And because the world is watching us, especially as we're being examples, and as our role leadership, we're examples to many. And especially now with social media, with all these recordings, YouTube, being on Instagram, being influencers now, even of our own faith, maintaining that word, right? Maintaining that stability, and especially in our revitalization of the family cell, of our culture, values, conserving our faith and our church, because even though there's so much confusion, even of words that are being heard, right, that we are experiencing in our church, and that's why we have to remain faith in our firm in our faith, because if not, if we're lacking in our faith, then of course we're dragged into other ideas or through other influencers. So yes. So what would you tell a young adult, maybe in the confusion of the world, where father figure isn't present?
I would say so for a young adult in a very confusing world where a father figure isn't present, it's very challenging. Let's get that out of the way, because we live in a digital realm in which we receive almost instantaneous updates about the world, and the news outlets do a fantastic job of dragging even the most traditional minded man or woman down with the latest scandals, the latest chaos, the latest news that serve to detract us from what we should be doing right then and there. So my first avenue of approach is that, are you frequenting the sacraments, or are you paying more attention to what is chaotic? Are you attending mass more than just on Sunday? Are you going to confession, reciting the rosary, perhaps doing a penitential act? That's the first individual thing that you as a man or a woman could do. The second thing is, are you at a solid parish? Are you at a parish where you could easily put yourself under the wing of a good priest who could serve as your spiritual director? Is said spiritual director meeting you on a frequent basis and giving you the right guidance in the right direction in living out your spiritual life? The third thing is, other than getting your spiritual life right, what are you doing to get involved with your parish? Those are the small things that you should perhaps pay attention to instead of listening to all the chaotic things that are going around you. It's tempting to listen. And yes, of course, it's good to be in the loop. However, when your attention is more on the latest scandal instead of your own soul, the welfare of your own soul and perhaps those around you, then perhaps it's time to re-examine where your priorities are. You could also say, for those that are perhaps lacking in good examples, who are those at your local parish or community that you could put yourself under? There are plenty of married couples with children, and for those that are perhaps discerning the clergy, spending more time with the priest and maybe seminarians that are already a couple years down the road. Those are two avenues of approaching. And for those that are discerning marriage, one shouldn't pray for a spouse to come very soon. One should pray to become the ideal husband or the ideal woman that each respective gender would desire marriage with. What are you doing individually to do that? Because I always have to tell myself that if I were to get married tomorrow, would I embody the duties and responsibilities that is expected of a husband and a father? And it's not so much of appearing awesome on social media, but it's the little things that happen off camera. Say the toilet getting clogged or the car breaking down of the spouse. Those are things that men should be taking care of. And if I know that I'm lacking in those skills, what am I doing to prepare for them? But to go back to the original question, it's having to discern where our priorities lie within all this chaotic environment, and then seeing where our priorities lie. And if it's not at the right spot, to redirect ourselves to what is essential as of right there and then. In terms of faith, for those that are just discouraged just by the repeated scandals that have literally been going on for the last decade or so, and it's not to discount the current pontificate, I would say that for the last 2,000 years that the church has been in existence, there's been repeated scandals and chaos and losses and perhaps defeats. But at the end of the day, Christ is king. The church has been in continued existence since 33 AD. And just know that, yes, it will get worse before it becomes better. But know that at the end of the day, the church is still standing.
Yes, exactly. This isn't the first scandal that's happening in our church. It's gone for generations and generations. We've had it in many popes. So this shouldn't be something that discourages us. So we have to build our faith and remain this firmness, and absolutely in the in the masculinity and the young adults and in our families. Now, I think we've also seen, and this could be advice to the isolation of men and women as well. I mean, we experienced a lot of isolation in 2020, right, or when COVID hit, and I don't know if there's been maybe many have hidden themselves, or there's a lot of people who are avoiding to interact even in their communities, or are have fear, or there's fear as well. But what would you say to that, Daniel?
It's true, and I've seen it since 2020, where there's plenty of individuals that have isolated themselves intentionally or not. And I think that that's why there's this huge fixation on group chats, be it on Instagram, Telegram, WhatsApp, Signal. And while those are great means of communication, the question is, what exactly are you doing to move forward, aside from just sharing memes and just being on a group chat all day? That's one of the purpose of the Men's Rosary March, is to get men out of that rut specifically. Don't just do things online. Don't just do things in a group chat. embody in real life.
Yes.
If
Overwhelming
you are not,
schedules.
yeah, because that's the thing, is that you could be sharing memes all day of the Reconquista or taking back our streets from the degenerates that have taken over since then. But my question is, okay, what exactly are you doing aside from making another meme or two? Memes are hilarious, but what are you doing to go beyond making memes and putting down others that are actually doing something? You see, that's the thing, is that whenever someone attempts to do, say, a men's Rosary March or another project that I'm involved in known as the Martyrs Walk in the Carolina States, there are those that obviously have a pang of envy, and they're just like, well, you see, they're paying X amount of dollars to get yelled at, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, well, okay, what exactly are you doing in turn? That's to address it, is don't just be on a group chat, do something in real life. It doesn't have to be a Rosary March. It doesn't have to be a Martyrs Walk. It doesn't have to be anything overly complicated. It's as simple as getting together and doing a group workout. It's as simple as getting together and doing something at your parish. It's as simple as perhaps meeting up if you are separated by distance. That's how you tackle those problems head on, is to do things in person. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. It could be as simple as just meeting together as a group, having coffee or having a picnic, or again, perhaps doing something like a Rosary March.
Yes, that the fear of communication. I feel like you go to even a coffee shop, or you go, and everyone's on their phone, looking at memes, sharing reels, and we're afraid of approaching people. And what happened to that? Well, I just saw a video too of how a man would ask a woman out, and now it's like, I don't know if you've seen that video where he shows up.
Oh, yes.
In his Tesla, and I'm here, and now it's just like, instead of getting off the car and knocking on the door. So a lot of that, it has to be revitalized, and bringing back even that culture, right? That masculinity, that those qualities and characteristics in man and woman in our identity.
Exactly. So the biggest problem these days, and this is why I hate it when people bring that influencer title, because at the end of the day, I'm just a man that genuinely loves his parish and just loves sharing the example of those that are at my parish. That's the foundations of my content. You shouldn't have to learn how to be a man, or perhaps how to be a woman, from some random influencer online that has tens of thousands of followers. You should learn it from that married couple. You should learn it from that man that has been married for over 3 decades now. You go over for dinner. You get to see how the children interact, where your role is as a man and woman, respectively. And then there's also the conversations that need to be had, where, say, you're out with a group of men. How you become a man, especially a Catholic man, is perhaps through a boxing or cookout night. We do that on a weekly basis at my parish. And we have these rated R conversations that I will say unapologetically that women will never hear. If a woman hears it, perhaps she'll be deeply offended. But guess what? That's how you learn how to be a man from that perspective. A woman may not like it, but guess what? That's how a man learns how to be a man. It could be the same thing when it comes to a woman, where perhaps she's been invited to a baby shower. Now, we all know that women all organize baby showers and do all the things that are, say, putting flowers on the altar, decorating the altar, doing those things that we saw during Christmas type season. And guess what? That's when women have those rated R conversations that men will never hear about. But that's how you learn how to be a good woman, is to place yourself under that tutelage. If you place yourself under a tutelage that costs you a subscription monthly, perhaps you are getting good information, perhaps you're not. But the biggest thing that one could remember is that the community is right there at their home parish. It's a matter of reaching out and making yourself readily available to be of an assistant. That's where people miss the mark, is that they focus, once again, as we began our discussion on at the beginning of this conversation, is that There's a lot of folks that focus on the aestheticism. Oh, I want to look beautiful for social media. And
Yes.
after Sunday Mass, I'm just going to go have brunch and a picnic. Nothing wrong with that. However, if you're not making yourself known to families that are perhaps even looking to mentor those that desire the life that they're already living through, then that's where the disconnect is.
Absolutely, definitely. And yeah, and that's the thing that since everything's on social media, we're so guided by that. And instead of just remain keeping everything private instead, and and just living, through our teachings, through our example, as we already have said. And yeah, definitely, for sure. Well, you mentioned the Martyrs Walk. Tell us about that.
The Martyrs Walk is an immersive environment in which it's a Catholic men's boot camp. It's a Catholic men's boot camp that has a military element to it, in addition to Ignatian spirituality and a Benedictine schedule. The purpose of it is to give a rite of passage, because a rite of passage for Catholic men is extremely lacking nowadays, or perhaps it's for a man that is looking for a brotherhood. Again, as we've discussed earlier, there's a brotherhood that's lacking, and a group chat will never be able to replace an in-person brotherhood. It also serves as, one could argue, a traumatic bonding experience, because men really bond together in adverse trials and tribulations. So it was started last year by Jason Murphy, who's also the host of the Obligation Show, and it served as a catalyst because there are certain men's boot camps out there that cost quite a bit. However, there's nothing that's tailored specifically to a Catholic man. So it's a 3-day boot camp that happens over in the Carolina states. It costs around 1,750, which is a fraction of a cost of a lot of these Catholic men's boot camps. It essentially serves as a gut check for a Catholic man on where he stands on his faith. And you walk away with a strong, tight-knit brotherhood, a sense of faith that is revitalized, in addition to a support system that is, again, lacking if you just simply have a group chat.
Mm, nice. Well, and that's not here in California, right? Is it here in California?
No, it's over in North and South Carolina.
Okay.
One has to travel over there in order to do it. A lot of the advertisements say that it's virtual martyrdom, but it could be mistaken for, oh, attending it via Zoom. It's like, sure, you could attend an online class, but you can't really attend an online boot camp. It's all done in person. And
Okay.
it's only going to take place in the Carolina states.
Wonderful. But is there going to be another Rosary March coming up again, like the one that happened this Saturday?
We have one tentatively scheduled for April 6th. We don't have any further planned ones out for the time being, but
Okay.
it's going to happen after Easter due to scheduling conflicts that happen throughout February and March.
Well, let's continue to encourage our men, and definitely, all the young adults, the young men, to attend, and definitely to know the true meaning of the Rosary. First of all, right? That it's the communication, and with walking hand in hand with our Blessed Mother, and definitely for to strengthen our church and strengthen our values, and our men in their masculinity, to revitalize our men, our masculinity, well, for all the men. Is there any other um, you know thoughts that you'd like to share with us, or share with the men, Daniel?
I think that keep things simple. Don't
Mhm.
overly complicate things. It's as simple as just going to church more than once, frequenting the sacraments such as adoration, confession, those that are already readily available. Get yourself a spiritual director, and also do things in person, not just on group chats. Whether it is, again, boxing with the boys at the park, or doing cookouts just for the guys, or hanging out together, even. Do those
Yes,
things in person. And that's how you'll find that you truly bond and revitalize brotherhood as a Catholic man.
absolutely. Yes. You know, And this right now, what you've shared, this advice also, and I did ask a question about fatherhood in, for the young adult, but even men who didn't have that father figure growing up, and maybe it's, it's like, what do I do? How do I embrace this masculinity, right? How do I truly act like a man? How do I, uh, break that chain, deliverance from, that I didn't have the father figure, that wound that was, how to move in sacrifice and love.
I would say for those that have that wound of having an absent father, or perhaps just not knowing their father at all, I would say take a look at deliverance prayers that are readily available these days, courtesy of Father Ripperger. And also, there's an app called the Catholic Exorcism app, completely free. There's prayers for the laity to pray to. I believe that there are specific prayers that address those kinds of wounds. Now, for a man that seeks the example, as discussed earlier, it's sticking yourself under the wing of what you're called to do. If you are discerning the priesthood, stick yourself under the wing of a solid priest who could guide you through that process. If you are discerning fatherhood and in marriage, stick yourself under the wing of a man that is perhaps married for quite some time, has perhaps a few children, if not more, or one to fit a van, and find out what works, what doesn't, and how you could go about emulating said man that you've placed yourself under his mentorship. That's the best way to go about it. Avoid someone like myself, because the most that I could do is just simply plant a seed. I can't be that. As much as someone could view me as the father figure that they never have, or the brother that they never have, I appreciate it, but understand that the best mentorship you could ever receive at the end of the day is that priest or that father/husband that is at your parish. They're the best role models that you could ever emulate.
Absolutely. Well, Daniel, we want to thank you for joining us today. This was a very fruitful recording podcast, and I'm sure many are going to, receive a great message. And, our goal in our ministry is that even through one word that is shared on our podcast, it could be for the benefit of that person who is looking for that word, right? And so we are in constant prayer and working. Yes, it's the Imago Dei digital ministry, and yes, we did talk about influencing, but this is to encourage young adults to put into practice talents that they want to put into practice, that we're here to support them, that they're not alone, and there you go, so that they're not isolated, but to put their faith into practice and these talents that God has given them. So we want to thank you, and we hope to have you on another episode as well, now in his design podcast, talking to more young adults. And we thank you, the In Her Details team, and may God bless you and continue to count with our prayers.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be on.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Of course.